The cold wind howled across the lonely countryside road as Thomas trudged forward, his worn-out boots scraping against the frost-covered stones. His coat, torn at the sleeve and missing buttons, barely shielded him from the biting air. In his arms, wrapped in a threadbare blanket, lay his infant daughter, Emily, her tiny lips trembling from hunger. Her weak cries pierced the quiet, breaking Thomas's heart each time they escaped her fragile lungs. It had been 2 days since she had proper milk. He had begged in the nearby town, knocked on doors, faced curses and closed windows, yet no one had shown kindness. Once a proud craftsman, Thomas's life had turned to ashes after the fire that burned down his workshop and home. His wife had died that same night, leaving him with only Emily, their last piece of shared love, their small reason to live. The world had been cruel, but Thomas refused to let go. Tonight, desperate and exhausted, he stumbled upon a narrow path leading to a large stone house at the edge of the woods. Light flickered through its windows, a sign of life, warmth, and maybe, hope. His knees trembled as he climbed the wooden steps and knocked, praying for mercy. Inside, Eleanor sat by the fireplace, rocking gently in her chair. The fire's orange glow danced across her soft wool robe and long golden hair that cascaded over her shoulders like sunlight. Her arms cradled a small baby, her godchild, whom she often watched for her sister. Eleanor's mansion, though filled with art and luxury, was often silent, haunted by loneliness. She had inherited her family's fortune, but what she lacked was something money could never buy: connection, love, humanity. Her days were filled with quiet routines, tending to her garden, reading old books, and listening to the clock echo through the emptiness. When the knock came, sharp and uncertain, she startled, wondering who could possibly visit at this hour. She opened the door slowly, and saw him. A rugged man, eyes hollow but burning with desperation, clutching a baby to his chest. The sight struck her deeply, like a forgotten memory. "Please, ma'am," Thomas stammered, his voice cracking. "She hasn't eaten in 2 days. I'll work, I'll do anything, just a little milk. Please." Eleanor's heart clenched. She looked down at the infant, whose face was pale, lips dry, eyes half closed. Without a word, she stepped aside and said softly, "Come in, both of you." The warmth of the fire wrapped around them as Thomas entered, unsure if this kindness was real. He held Emily tightly, afraid she might slip away if he loosened his grasp. Eleanor led them to a chair near the fireplace and disappeared into the kitchen. When she returned, she carried a small glass of warm milk, but as she saw the baby whimpering weakly, instinct overcame hesitation. She set the glass down and carefully took Emily into her arms. "She's too small for that," she murmured, and before Thomas could speak, she sat in the chair, unbuttoned her robe slightly, and brought the baby close. Thomas froze, speechless, tears pooling in his eyes as he watched the stranger nurse his child. The firelight flickered across their faces, the weary father, the compassionate woman, and the fragile infant finding life again. It was a moment beyond words, beyond charity. It was humanity at its purest. When Emily finally stopped crying, her small body relaxed, asleep in Eleanor's arms. Thomas dropped to his knees. "Ma'am, thank you. I can't repay this." His voice broke. "You don't have to," she said, her eyes glistening. "She's a child. No one should beg to keep their child alive." For a long moment, silence filled the room, only the crackling of the fire and the faint breathing of the baby could be heard. Eleanor offered him food, dry clothes, and a place to rest for the night. Thomas resisted at first, pride still clinging to the fragments of his dignity, but she insisted. "Rest. For her sake," she said softly. He finally agreed. As he ate, she quietly studied him, the calloused hands, the scar on his brow, the way he spoke to his daughter even in whispers, promising her a better tomorrow. Something inside Eleanor stirred, something long dormant. She saw in him the same love her father once had before wealth hardened their family's heart. Hours passed. The storm outside grew louder, snow falling heavy. They spoke little, but when they did, it was honest, simple, like two souls stripped of all pretenses. Thomas told her about the fire, the debts, the nights he spent sleeping in barns, the strangers who turned him away. Eleanor listened, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. When he noticed, he said quietly, "I didn't mean to make you sad." She smiled faintly. "It's not sadness. It's shame. For all the doors that closed on you." When dawn arrived, Thomas prepared to leave. "You've done enough," he said, his eyes still soft with gratitude. "I can't take more from you." "Wait," she said. "Where will you go?" He hesitated. "Anywhere that'll take me." Thomas's lips parted, disbelief flashing across his face. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," she said gently. "I know you'd die before you'd let harm come to her. That's all the character I need." Tears welled again, but this time, they carried hope. Thomas nodded slowly. "If you're sure." "I am," Eleanor said, smiling for the first time in years. Days turned into weeks. Thomas worked from dawn to dusk, repairing fences, chopping wood, tending to animals. Emily grew healthier, her laughter echoing through the halls like music. Eleanor found herself drawn to the barn just to hear it, to see the light returning to that man's eyes. In the evenings, they'd sit by the fire, sharing stories, he of his past struggles, she of a world that had given her everything except meaning. Slowly, without realizing it, they began to fill each other's empty spaces. One night, as snow fell outside again, Thomas spoke softly, "You've given us more than I can ever repay." Eleanor turned to him. "Then repay me with honesty. Do you still dream, Thomas?" He looked into the fire. "I used to. About building things. A workshop, maybe. Making toys, furniture, things that last. But dreams don't put food on the table." She smiled faintly. "Maybe it's time someone helped you rebuild it." He frowned. "What do you mean?" Eleanor hesitated, then said quietly, "I wasn't just being kind that night. I could have sent a maid to fetch milk. I could have closed the door, like others did. But something in me wanted to remember what being human feels like. I'm not just a woman living alone in an old house, Thomas. I own this estate. And several others." Thomas blinked, stunned. You're a millionaire?" She nodded. "But that means nothing if I can't use it to make someone's life better." He stood there, speechless, humbled beyond words. "Why me?" "Because you didn't ask for pity," she said softly. "You asked for milk. And then you thanked me like I'd given you the world. That's the kind of heart I trust with mine." The firelight shimmered between them. Neither spoke for a long time, but in the silence, something profound passed, an understanding, a bond forged by compassion and truth. Months later, with Eleanor's support, Thomas rebuilt his workshop on her land. His craft flourished again, and soon, his furniture became known for its warmth and detail, just like the men who made them. Emily grew strong, often toddling around Eleanor's garden, laughing under the sunlight. The house, once lonely and quiet, became filled with life and purpose. And somewhere between gratitude and respect, love quietly bloomed. Years passed, and people in nearby towns often whispered about the mysterious woman who had once been a recluse but now smiled like she had the world. Few knew the truth, that the men she had once fed in mercy had fed her soul in return. Together, they built not just a home, but a legacy of kindness. And every evening, as the fire glowed in the same old room, Thomas would sit beside Eleanor and whisper, "You gave us milk that night, but you gave me life." She would smile, holding Emily on her lap, replying, "And you gave me a reason to live it." So remember, dear viewer, sometimes the smallest act of compassion can change not one, but many lives. If you believe in kindness, in love, in second chances, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, because more stories like this await, stories that remind us that humanity, when shared, can turn strangers into family, and broken hearts into miracles.